So we'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, let me make sure I can hit this little video here.
Doing things the right way. Not quite the golden rule, but it's up there. Holding yourself to a higher standard.
Oh, my fault. I was trying to make the bar disappear.
Doing things the right way. Not quite the golden rule, but it's up there. Holding yourself to a higher standard. Even when no one's looking. Your dad did it. His dad too. When the time is right, you'll pass it along. At National Cattlemen's Beef Association, we're for anyone who takes pride in doing things the right way. For more than 30 years, our Beef Quality Assurance Training and Certification Program has been guiding ranchers, veterinarians, and transportation professionals. BQA has become the standard for proper management techniques of the beef industry. It's a commitment to quality and improved profitability that helps raise consumer confidence in the safety and quality of their food. BQA programs educate and train professionals dedicated to moving the cattle industry forward. Professionals who take that responsibility seriously. The ones who've never cut a single corner or spoken the words good enough. BQA is for cattlemen who believe doing things the right way is the only way. And that's never going to change.
Simple little commercial, but this commercial kind of sums up what BQA is. It's doing things the right way, and we're already doing that, but we need to communicate to the American consumer and to the American public, even the ones that aren't eating our products, that we're doing things the right way, the humane way, and we're taking care of our animals. And so I like to show that commercial because I like to compare it to certified Angus beef. You know, those of you that have watched over the years, you know, you see someone go to the store and they have to buy Angus beef. They have to have this certified Angus beef. Well, because the Angus Association did a really good job of marketing. And hopefully, National Cattlemen's Beef Association and the Beef Board are doing as good a job marketing of the BQA program, showing the American consumer that we are doing things the right way. So, if for whatever reason, I'm hung up, but that, maybe I may have broke it.
No.
It gets real boring without my slides. There it goes.
What in the world?
I don't know. But we're going to talk about responsible cattle management, quality management, and HACCP-like considerations. If any of you have ever worked in any kind of food industry, the HACCP plans and things like that are a big part of it, and a lot of that should start on the farm, especially when we start talking about vaccines and that sort of thing. The biggest goal here, I'm not going to go through everything here, but what can go wrong? Well, a lot of stuff. And if you've been raising cattle any amount of time, I was having a conversation with the two young ladies here, you know, nothing ever seems to go wrong when the weather's pretty and sunshiny and 70 degrees. Everything seems to go wrong, and you're out there pulling a calf at midnight when it's snowing. And that's just not fun. We get one day of snow a year in Georgia, and that just seems to be the day that things go wrong. At the very least, a cold rain. Behavior and handling. Now, if you've ever sat through one of Miss Tammy's presentations on low-stress cattle handling, you're going to get a few repeats. Hers is a lot more in-depth and a lot better. We ain't watching that video. Good animal handling is one of the few things that you can do to increase performance and increase your outcomes here. That's one of the few things we have control over. We can't control the weather, we can't control the animals, we can control how we handle them, how we respond to them. Cattle have certain instincts. They aren't like dogs. They're usually a lot bigger than us, and we're not going to overpower them in the traditional sense. They can be conditioned. We can train them to a certain extent, especially through things like buckets. Funniest thing you'll see is cattle producer, when they go out and start hitting the bucket, here they come running. because they've been trained to that. They have been conditioned to that. And then they're pretty perceptive when it comes to, you know, the things that are going on around them. You've probably heard about the flight zone. Cattle can see pretty much 300 degrees. They can't see directly behind them. They're pretty sensitive. I worry about the folks sometimes that do a whole lot of hollering, because one day you may make that one mad that decides that you're hollering just too much for them. So, depending on the animal, their flight zone can be different. The worst thing I've ever put in my pasture is an old show cat. Not because she wasn't any good, because she had no flight zone. She did not, if she didn't want to move, she would stand there. She had no fear. You know, on the flip side of that, you get one that has a flight zone that's too big, and you can't catch her. So, you got to be kind of careful working with cattle, knowing that point of balance, knowing where you need to walk, and it does vary from cow to cow, but knowing where are they going to turn, at what point. I like to teach this often with live animals. I've done it shooting side many times, and you can go out there and you can demonstrate that. A lot of you in this room know your cattle, you know your neighbor's cattle, and you can go up to them and know when they're going to start moving, which direction you want them to go. The important thing I try to tell, especially my 4-H'ers that are working with show animals, if a show cow won't move, you walk up behind it and twist its tail and it goes. I'd never recommend that with pasture cows, because if you're getting that close, you're in that zone that they can kick you, because they can see 300 degrees, they can also kick 300 degrees. They're creatures of habit. Look in your pasture, you're going to see a trail that runs from the water trough to somewhere. Handling cattle in groups. I think the worst I've ever been scared by cows is I was trying to take one to a chute. She did not like that. She come back through the gator with me. It had a top on it. I was a little afraid that night. It could have been avoided had I pushed her with her friends. Loud noises, fast movements, again, that depends on your cattle. I will tell you this, I run a 6-minute mile. I love to run. I've not found a cow I can outrun. They are pretty quick animals, and you're probably not going to outrun them and catch them and make them do what you want to, at least not just running across a pasture. You've heard the lead cow mentality. There's one in the pasture. If you can get her to go, others will follow. Using those points of balance, not necessarily getting right behind them to push them. A big thing that we sometimes struggle with is sorting the calves away from the cows. And we do that for a lot of reasons, but it's nauseating to see a calf squished in a chute by 1,300 pound cow come across the top of it. Properly restrained cattle. Now that's a fun one. Most of us, hopefully, have a head gate. I hope we're moving towards some squeeze chutes and things like that. But at the very least, I hope you have a head gate. I get a call about 3 times a year. I'm sure Miss Tammy's got similar calls over the years, that someone wants to get in the cattle business and they've gone out and they've bought 10 cows and a bull. And you go out there and you try to help them, but they don't have any equipment. They don't have a head gate. Trying to tie a cow to a tree is a good way to get hurt. But there are people that are good at that, and they can cowboy. I'm not one of them. I wore my fancy boots tonight. I'm not running through a cow pasture in these. But things like proper working facilities, proper equipment. Experienced people. Collecting kids at the high school gym after basketball practice, probably not going to end well for anybody, especially you. And then treating cattle with respect. These are some big animals. They can't hurt you. We just don't need them to know that they can hurt you. Facilities and equipment. Take care of your equipment. Make sure it's maintained, that it's clean. One thing that I like to do before working cattle is walk through that chute. If I walk through the chute and I don't see anything, I feel a lot better about it. But if a Dorito bag has come from the highway and flown into the chute, that can be the difference in a good day working cows and a bad day working cows. I had a preferred chute one time. That preferred chute did really good until that little gearbox went out. When that little gearbox went out, anything that put pressure on it would fly it open. And I was working cows with a man by the name of Owen Thompson. He was our young farmer teacher. He was one of my high school ag teachers. And I watched him go flying. Because that little preferred chute, that lever, that cow pushed through and he went flying. Checking those things, maintaining those things can help avoid some of those things. Sharp edges or protrusions. Have you ever walked through a chute and not seen a nail sticking out? Because I haven't. Because we leave them out there for 6 months out of the year, we don't use them, and all of a sudden there's 3 nails sticking straight out. Go through there before we work cattle, eliminate some of those things. Now this is a Cadillac chute. Most farmers do not have this, nor are you going to, because that costs more than a lot of cars. Well, what cars used to cost. But the one thing I love about this picture, and I want everybody to see, is this rubber mat they've got in front of these cattle. Some of the craziest things you'll ever see is when you open that chute, what's that cow going to do? Jump, run. She is taking off as fast as you know. Maybe he, I don't know. All I can see is him. As fast as they can get out of there, they're taking off. If you're on slick concrete, or even just soppy mud, it can result in an injury on that calf. Give them something to get some traction on. I don't care if it's a mat made out of old tires, if it's a stall mat from Tractor Supply, or you just keep good gravel there. Give some traction, give them something, and that will help keep everybody safe and happy. Handling tools. Now, oftentimes I'll bring in some flags and some sorting sticks and all these things, and honestly, I flew in from Portland, Oregon yesterday, and it's a miracle I grabbed my box. But when we start talking about handling tools, we know that these are not meant to beat a cow. We sometimes forget that. But oftentimes, we can deter a cow. We can make them do what we want to with a sorting stick, or we can make them do it with a flag, or one of these with the paddle. I don't like the paddle myself. I like the flag. I can pop a noise and usually they'll go the other way. But it's to give the cow the illusion that I'm bigger than I am. And hopefully they will go the other way. Again, it's a point of balance, that flight zone that we talked about. But using good tools, using tools correctly will go a long way in handling them. Chutes, pens, alleys that are, if they're not designed for cattle, they've been built for cattle. I've seen lots of people use guardrails off the highway. Our sale barn has all of their facilities are built with guardrails off the highway. It works fine. Again, you just got to make sure that they are designed, that they're wide enough or they're narrow enough. I go to a lot of places that do not have the capability to handle the bull they own. Not ideal. Not usually a problem either until you need to put that bull in a chute. Never abuse cattle. Cows are bigger than us. We don't need them figuring it out. They eventually will. If you're hiring the kids from the high school, that's great. We need them in the industry. We need them to learn, but teach them something. Make them come to a cattleman's meeting and learn just a little bit about it. Timely observations of cattle. Now this is one that most good producers that care enough to be at a meeting like this don't struggle with. But again, I'm about 90 miles north of Atlanta, and I get that call. We just bought 700 acres. There's one farm in Franklin County that's 700 acres. And we want to raise cattle. Great. You can raise a lot of cattle on 700 acres. So I get out there and I'm visiting with them. They want to raise cattle, but they want to live in Atlanta Monday through Friday. That's not making timely observations. You can have a lot of problems if you're 90 miles away from your herd. Regularly inspect those facilities we talked about. Feed and water handling equipment, keep it clean. We see cattle drinking out of ponds, and rivers, and creeks, and NRCS has all those programs to hopefully alleviate some of that. But, clean the water trough a couple times a year, get some of that algae out of them, maintain them. Again, you don't want the nosy neighbor riding down the road and seeing a green water trough, because that just gives them ammunition. Biosecurity, how good's the fence? When we're talking biosecurity, how good is that fence? None. The problem with most cattle producers in this part of Georgia is there's not a barrier between them and their neighbor. If there is a barrier, it may be a tree line, something like that, but cattle herds are usually pretty close together. And so if we're bringing in animals, we're doing things, we got to make sure there's a little more than a fence line separating them. I see a lot of folks that will go buy cattle at the sale barn. Nothing wrong with it. I made a lot of money over the years buying feeder cattle in the spring and selling them in the fall, so I didn't have to feed hay because it's cold when you do that. And the problem is, you need to quarantine them. You need to maintain them. A fence line is not enough to maintain a quarantine zone. You got to have some separation between them. Any cattle that are disease carriers, incubators, or vectors, well, if we bought them at the sale barn on a Tuesday, we don't know. Quarantine them. Put them in another area. Watch out for other animals and pets, wildlife. I'm doing some work on the Asian longhorn tick, which is a vector of disease in cattle. And the problem is with things like ticks is when that possum, raccoon, white-tailed deer walks through your pasture, they can leave those behind. So we have to be cautious and regularly inspect our animals because we can't do anything about the wildlife. People, the poultry industry has done a great job of this, making sure that people don't go between farms.
Excuse me.
One farm and the next farm. Beef industry hadn't done as good a job because we are still independent, farmers. But I go to the Subway or the truck stop or the Mexican restaurant, and I'll see a bunch of farmers sitting there together, straight out of their poultry houses or their cow pastures. We're spreading those. We're taking things with us. Hopefully nothing, but if we have some, we could. Again, the poultry industry does a good job cleaning their vehicles, making sure that they're not taking things from farm to farm. Carcasses of dead cattle. I don't know what Warren County's policy is on it. Franklin County, I can call and go by the county commissioner's office and they will send somebody to bury it if I pay I think it's an $85 fee now. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but doing that in a timely manner. Well, if you work a 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 job, you're probably not going to know something happened to that cow during the workday when you can swing by that office and pay that fee. So you need to have a plan. Any feed stuff that can be contaminated with feces, mold, if you're just storing feed, impure water. This can be a problem for some of our diseases that can live. E. coli and things can live in the water. Salmonella. We want to make sure that the cattle are drinking out of the clean trough and not the dirty mud puddle. And I know that's sometimes hard to contain, but it is one thing. We don't worry too much about aerosol, but what are the biosecurity risks of your own operation? What are you running into that is a risk for you that may not be for the guy sitting at the table with you? What is the risk that you need to be looking at recognizing those, mitigating those, taking care of that problem. Basic sanitation, cleaning equipment and vehicles, clean the trailer every now and then. And then prevent manure contamination of feed and feeding. Herd health. Everybody at this point has hopefully established a veterinary client-patient relationship. Several years ago, they pulled our antibiotics off the shelf, so they had to come through a licensed vet. Probably not a bad idea, but it hit hard for those of us that were used to going to the feed store, buying what we needed and taking care of things ourselves. So hopefully, at this point, everybody's got a good relationship with that vet. And basically what this means is that vet is supposed to come out at least annually. Even if it's a herd health examination, they're supposed to come out at least once a year, do an evaluation, have that relationship with you. And then beyond that, if they say, we'll drop ship, LA 200 or whatever it is you may need, New Flora, Draxon, have that relationship. If you don't have that relationship, I would suggest that you do at least a herd health exam and get that relationship started. What are we worried about in terms of target diseases? What are we worried about? I mean, we've got all sorts of drugs over here, and I'm not going to go into which one's better than the other, but vaccinating, doing the things that we can to prevent some of those things. Medicated feeds and things are not as available as they once were. Vaccinating at the appropriate times, the appropriate intervals. If the directions say you come back with a booster, you should probably come back with a booster. Sometimes life gets hectic and we don't, but those are the kind of things we need to do. And then, of course, treatment protocols if our preventative measures are not enough. Was an ounce of prevention or whatever the old saying is. Prevent as much as we can makes our life a little easier. Safe, well-managed feedstuffs. I don't care where you buy your feed. I don't care where you buy your hay. I don't make any more money no matter where you buy it. But make sure that you're buying it somewhere that is clean and reputable. Make sure that you're buying hay that's high quality, been tested. We know what's in there. I got a hay sample back today, had an RFQ of 34. I've been doing this for a little while now, and in my 11-ish years of doing this, I've never seen one that low.
In my 31, I've never seen one that low.
Yeah, it was useless. I told him, don't even feed this to your cattle because they will starve to death with a full belly. I can't look at it and tell you that it was bad because I went and pulled the sample myself. So there was no indication that it was bad until the test came back. It took the test several weeks, and when I called the lab, they said they had ran it multiple times because they were concerned. So please, 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 if you're buying hay, buying feed, know what you're getting. Ms. Tammy can help you with that. We can do some hay quality analysis. They can run feed analysis. And if you're mixing your own rations, send it and get tested. Make sure we're doing what we think we're doing. Book values are great on things, but they're not always 100% accurate. Records to the next part of the sector, if you are selling feeder calves or you're selling stock or something like that, let them know what's been done. External, internal parasites, man, we can talk about this all day long. And we can have some, I'm sure, very heated discussion because nobody has the right answer when it comes to parasite control. There are many, many options when it comes to dewormers, when it comes to fly management, now tick management. Now we're even thinking about screw worms because we've all seen the news. So there's a lot of things we can do. We can do an entire program on external parasites. We can do another 2 or 3 nights on internal parasites. But, you know, your parasite control, I'm sure Dr. Hinkle was here earlier on, and I know she harps on the fly control and things pretty hard. So make sure we're doing some of those things, getting those relationships established where they need to. All right, when we get cows, we're bringing cattle into the herd. When we're receiving them, we're processing them. Hopefully you're doing something with them, whether they're born on your place or you're buying them and bringing them in. If you have a completely closed herd, you probably have some sort of protocol you do with new calves, hopefully. Whether it's the banding, tagging, vaccinating at the appropriate times. My personal preference is I like to do everything I can when that calf's as small as possible, because I'm still bigger than that calf. 2 or 3 people sometimes, you know, can corner up and take care of them. Dehorning, if anybody's not running polled cattle, hopefully you're taking care of some of those horns, syringes, needles, injection sites. We're going to talk about all that stuff, and then pain management. All right. Most vaccines will have some sort of instruction. Most medications have some sort of instruction. A lot of them will give you multiple options for administering the medication. If subcutaneous is one of the options, we always recommend that you utilize it. Not all things. Some things have to be IV. Some things have to be intramuscular. But if you have a choice, it's going to leave the least amount of residue if you can go with a subcutaneous injection. We want to do all of our injections in that neck muscle. Why? Because there's not a big demand for neck meat. Not a very expensive cut of steak right there. If we're going to cause a problem, we're going to cause that residue, we're going to cause something that is less desirable at the processor, we want to do it in that neck muscle. We get in this real tight triangle there, and if you've ever done this, hopefully you realize that there's a muscle right there. That's where we're going to give that intramuscular injection. We got a little more range here when it comes to subcutaneous injections. We got a little more freedom there in terms of where we can pull that skin up. Some folks are really good. They can stick it and pull the trigger and be done with it. I'm not that guy either, and I own it. I got to do some tension here. This is what we don't want to do. We don't want to stick in the hip. A little more valuable cut of meat, we're probably going to leave some drug residue there. So if they fight, when they're processing, they find those spots, they're discarding that, cutting it out, sending it to ground beef. Tinting. I mentioned some folks are really good. They can take a auto dose gun, or they can take a needle and a syringe, and they can go up to that neck, they can angle it just right, hit it, and keep on going. I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that I've got to make my tent, and I got to be very careful. I'd rather not give myself a shot, ever. I don't even like a flu shot. So when you're doing that, you're making that tent, you're able to squeeze up that hide, and it gives you somewhere to put it. Should be fairly simple. For some of us, it's not. My wife's PhD is in animal science. When we are working calves together or cattle, I'm letting her give the shots. I'm catching the heads. I'm better at that part. We want to make sure that we're using a shorter needle. We don't want these big old long 1.5 inch needles, 2-inch needles. That's probably 2-inch. That's 5 gauge. I don't know. It's huge. We don't want to use a great big needle when we're trying to do a subcutaneous injection. These little guys work just fine. We don't want to use a extremely big gauge when we're talking any bigger than we have to. When we're giving something like penicillin, we're probably going to need a larger gauge to get that thick medicine into the animal But most of our products will go through a 16 gauge or something like that. If we're not tinting, we want to go even smaller. We want to go to that 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch needle because we don't want to get into the bone and be painful there. Ensuring effective drug use. Mix thoroughly and frequently, rock and don't shake. Okay. That's not hard. The biggest problem that I have with effective drug use is like this bottle right here that expired in the 13th of August of 20. It's expired. It's no good. Throw it away. Don't use it. Or send it to me and I'll use it for a teaching tool. That's what I've been doing. And when you mix it up and you leave it for hours upon hours, it loses its effectiveness. It's no longer any good. They have expiration dates on them for a reason. They give you instructions for keeping it in the dark for a reason. So make sure that we're not mixing up enough for 50 cows and we've only got 10 of them caught. Do not inject more than 10 cc's in any one location. I'm real bad about it. I got this 35 cc syringe. You go up, and it would be so easy to just keep pressing, and you end up with this big old knot. Move around, try to space them out at least 4 inches apart. Again, if we're talking intermuscular, we got a pretty small area we need to try to stick, but when we've got, when we're talking subcutaneous injections, we've got a little more room. I don't remember the LA200 dosage, but it's a lot. It's a lot of cc's that you have to give with LA200 to be effective. Mixing unlike products. Make sure we're mixing, I got two here. This is Pyramid 5 Plus. This is Pyramid 5. Could we mix them? Maybe, but I wouldn't recommend it. And these are the 10 dose boxes. I like these, especially if you're just working a few cows. They're a little cheaper. It's 10 doses at a time. You can get 50 dose bottles, but most of us aren't doctoring 50 cows at a time or vaccinating 50 cows at a time. Make sure that we're talking about live, if we've got modified lives or we've got killed vaccines, that we know what we're using and we're being consistent with that. Marker label syringes and keep them separate. Some people really like the auto dose syringes. That's fine. They're great. But make sure that if you're using them, that you're labeling them and you're never cleaning them with any kind of disinfectant. Use warm water. That's it. Because any kind of disinfectant will mess with those